Hello, it's another great day of recovery. I am going to be talking about a few things that just has been in my morning meditation and prayer. It just kind of jumped out at me, these ideas. And so I'm pretty interested in them right now. I'm going to talk about triggers. We use triggers a lot, it seems, in recovery, especially sexual recovery. Maybe overeating, we might say I was triggered to eat the whole bag of potato chips. I don't know if alcoholics say I was triggered to drink or triggered to use drugs, but I've been pondering the word trigger. And trigger, where else would we use that word? Like, for those that are old, Trigger was the name of Lone Ranger's horse. But um, yeah, we think of it as a gun. And I'm just wondering if that's the best metaphor for recovery, saying I was triggered when you did this. And I think people use it in context of PTSD. And I'm just wondering how useful that language is. I think what we are talking about is a reaction. And I learned somewhere that a reaction could be hyphenated, um, that it's something that's happened in the past, a reaction. Like if a person had suffered horrible abuse or had a difficult time, again, people could use the word even triggered when something in the present triggers them to the past. But I think another way to think about it is reaction. And I think I'm a person who wants to not just get saying the same thing over and over with the same language, but there's something about using different language to describe things. Um, and that'll lead to the next word that is going to come up for us. The word is spell. Um, my my great grandmother, um, bless her heart. This is her. This is Agnes, my great grandmother. So she was born in 1896, and she lived to be 96 years old. And a dedicated woman of faith, lived through many things. And it was only today that I was thinking of her. And what would happen is I would go visit her and we'd be doing something. And she was like baking her own bread. I think she wore, is this too personal? I don't, I think I can show this. I think my mom said she was wearing undergarments that are like from the old age, like even a corset for many years. That's how things were. And um, she would have these spells, as she called them. And as a small kid, it's like I was a little bit nervous. Like, is she having a heart attack? She had had many heart attacks. She was hard of hearing. She had sugar diabetes, as she called it. She had her back broken a number of times. She also had, I think the story is maybe only one lung. I don't know. She had tuberculosis. I mean, she just kept on going and going and going. And she would have these spells, though. And we know the word dizzy spell, fainting spell. And I was thinking of that. And what would she do? She would sit down. I'd say, well, should we get something? She's, nope, I'm fine. I'm just having a spell. And that's what would happen. And once the spell passed, she would get up and keep on going. So I don't know why I thought this, but a spell, I think, happens to us in recovery. We end up having a momentary disequilibrium. Is that a word? Where we lose our balance. I love this as a metaphor. We become imbalanced. We become emotionally dizzy. We might be having an anger or self-pity or resentment or fear or anxiety. We end up having but the key, what was helpful about this metaphor is it was momentary. It was not something that wouldn't pass. So it made me think about the phrase, and this too shall pass. On a side note, I saw these little plaques with these words, and it says, yeah, and this too shall pass. Some days may pass like a kidney stone, but it does pass. Oh my, that is so funny. But it helps to know that it'll pass. That's what we hope for. This world, as difficult as some days can be, we know that it will pass off and pass on into the next world. So spells pass. And so I started to look up the etymology. Etymology is the fancy word to describe the historical origin of words. And spell did involve time. It kind of had an indeterminate amount of time. And that's how spells are. Most spells would last 5-10 minutes in my situation with my grandmother. But, the idea is it was indeterminate. And like phrases like, we'll have a dry spell. So there's this idea of indeterminate amount of time, but it will pass. Once the dry spell passes, we'll get into the rainy season. The word spell also had to do with another idea, which I never really heard except in the phrase, hey, come to the porch and sit a spell. Okay. I thought the origin of that is that when two workers would be working, to spell each other meant that they would keep on working while the other went and did their bathroom break or whatever they needed to do. So if I was spelling Mike, it meant that I was covering Mike's workload while he went to the restroom. So that's an interesting idea, that during a spell you would sit at times and catch your breath. And we'll talk about what to do with emotional spells. Now, when you look this up on the internet, of course, all the incantation stuff, the magic stuff comes up, which is interesting. I didn't go into any of that. The word spelling comes up. And the origins of that, I think, is 16th century, but talked about to spell a word meant to replace something. Like the word cat, C-A-T, is a replacement for the actual person of cat. It represented it. So there's a certain sense that spell means to take the place of another. So how does this relate to us? I yesterday was feeling kind of wonky. I could tell that I was feeling wonky with, maybe some resentment, self-pity. I decided just to continue to go through the motions of prayer, trying to pray, connecting to God, trying to slow down, doing my work. I wasn't in a bad mood, but I was just not in my typical space. And I could pinpoint some of the thoughts that were negative and self-pitying. And I guess I did pray throughout that, but the spell left later. When did it leave later? Well, a couple of good things happened emotionally with clients. And then I got to go see my granddaughter. And my goal for visiting my granddaughter is to be in a good mood. I don't want to be holding a little tiny 3-week-old just to be downloading stress inadvertently by hearing stories of people's hardships. People that I'm working with, it's hardship. It's not easy. People being shot at, people getting cancer. I have to say that I feel silly now saying this because people would always say, oh, it's really must be emotional work. I shrug it off probably in kind of a prideful way. Oh, I'm fine. Now I'm not so fine. I mean, I feel fine enough to do the work, but having, let's say, about 50 people a month trying to get in and trying to gauge and pray who you let in the door. And then the stories are more difficult because there's so many people. So for a while, I was taking the more difficult things. And so then I've had to pray and balance that out with some easier situations, which are actually quite easy. It's funny, I was having a really good time with the client who just pretty much general wellness in trying to help better their life. And I realized I remember when things were like this, you know? Um, yeah. So then by the time I got to sit with my granddaughter, it was a lot of fun. And holding a baby, your focus is on the baby. Like I couldn't really watch TV. I was just holding the baby. And I realized there's something very valuable about calming down and really kind of doing nothing. So let's talk about spells that come across us and what I think is a good way for dealing with a spell. There's a terms, the grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. This comes from the AA book. It says the grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for us, I think it says this is like poison. I think they are. I think that negative thinking is really something we have to ward against. Um, and we'll talk later about thoughts in my next video. But what was valuable about seeing this is it was a spell. Like if I treated this like my great grandmother dealt with a spell, I thought, well, this kind of works. So the steps for dealing with a spell. Well, the first thing is to notice you're actually having a spell. That I think is the biggest thing because the subtleness of getting into something and then you don't even realize, hey, I'm in a bad mood or I'm resentment. If I'm watchful, prayerful, I'll go, oh, this is a spell. This is where I will act kind of wonky and say things that aren't helpful and become self-centered and self-pitying and all this stuff. So why do that? Once I know that it's a spell and it'll pass, that's what jumped out at me in morning meditation. Like I haven't thought of my grandmother and spells in 30 years, like nothing. So this is what was really cool about getting this kind of as a gift. Well, what's going to happen is after you notice you're having a spell, pause, stop, or at least slow down. And that's what we do if we were getting a fainting spell. Something's not right. Something's imbalanced. Something's going to lead to a fall, if we want to use that metaphor, a slip. So pause, stop, and slow down and say like it's right before an anger episode or resentment or fear. It's not actually going to harm us. There's no real downside to this. In the AA book, page 67, no, sorry, on page 87, 88, nope, it's page 87 or 86. It says, when we are agitated or doubtful, we pause. It says we pause when agitated or doubtful. We ask for the next right inspiration, next right thought. It doesn't really say the next right thought, but it might. It says the answers will come. And it says we relax and take it easy. So this is a time to catch your breath, to realize, okay, I was overworking or I'm starting to build up negative thoughts. So, and it's a good time to pray, just to ask God and invite God into this moment. Just God. And if we were actually having a spell like older people where they get so dizzy, they might have the thought, this could be my last breath. So, God, be with me. But we slow down, we pray, we catch our breath. And then I felt like the key is to listen. Like, Erik, stop talking. And I did this with a group of fellow recovering people a week ago, where we demonstrated how to do steps 10 and 11. And then in the group took 10 minutes and just silence and let people pray and ask God, but they think God's speaking to them and they could have a pencil and paper there. So I think listening is going to be really key. I get a lot of, I say good ideas, but I think they're gifted to me when I'm praying and then listening. Meditation comes up. If you could just erase your mindset of what you think meditation, because we often think Eastern meditation, but if you just read the AA book, it's going to talk about the valuable suggestions in meditation. If you look at the Hebrew understanding of meditation, Haggah, the word, sorry, I don't speak Hebrew, so the pronunciation is probably off, but it's like a cow chewing a cud, and it's regurgitating, it's digesting, it's quiet, it's listening, and then being quiet is part of to listen. I can't listen if I'm not quiet. So sitting there, and I would do small amounts, like 3 minutes. Set your handy clock, and just sit there. You could do 5 minutes. Okay. And there's a phrase called listen and learn. Yeah, I first heard it from some tough, I call them tough people. They're just direct people in 12 steps. They said, you know what, this person needs to shut up, listen, and learn. That's what they should be doing. They should be talking in meetings. And I think there's truth to that a new guy comes into the meeting, he wants to talk, and there's this idea that if he just gets everything or her off his or her chest, that then they'll get better. And dumping and venting is good, but that's not 12 steps. That's, I mean, they're sharing, but it's a guided share with what are my defects of character versus something that looks like a drunkalog. So I have found that if I am quiet, just listen and learn, I will learn more by doing that than by talking. So you take care. Have a great day of recovery. If you like us, go ahead and like us. If you want to leave a comment, we'd love to have comments so that we know what you would value in future videos. Thanks.